Well, we have seen a lot of ideas and different plans to fight for an advantage for white, but our work's not done yet in the anti-Moscow. So in chapter 7, I analyzed the other ideas, different move orders, and less exploited paths for white that lead to different positions from those we have analyzed so far. So among white's options here, I like it more Queen C2 with the very practical idea of bringing the rook to D1 and prepare a quick D5 advance in the century. This pawn break is very thematic, very typical, and it seems even the most principled idea for white once you realize it's possible. Other move orders are bishop e2, bishop b7, then castles, knight bd7, and here queen c2 transposes to our main line, or at least one variation. But here white can also try different ideas, such as d5. The direct d5 can also be considered here, and it seems also very logical after castling and trying to exploit black's king's 2 in the century. So here the only important thing that black should remember is you don't have to expose your king unnecessarily. So black shouldn't play e takes d5 in this position, because after e takes d5, knight takes d5, white has a very strong move here, bishop takes c4, followed by rook e1 with a crushing attack. So c takes d5. Now it may look that knight takes b5 is as a very strong move with the dangerous threat of knight c7 or knight d6. But the answer here for black is to sacrifice the exchange with knight takes e4. Then in case of knight c7, queen e7, king e7, knight takes a8, queen takes a8. Despite having the king in the center, black enjoys an amazing, fantastic compensation by the exchange due to this strong center of pawns, and this is much better than having the exchange now, because it will be easy to bring black's pieces into the game. So e takes d5 is safer for white. Knight takes d5, knight takes b5. White's position at first sight might look very good, very promising, because white is threatening to regain the pawn and also an annoying check on d6. But things are not that simple, because black simply plays a6. Then after knight bd4, this was played by Shirov, but bishop eg7, bishop takes c4 castles seems more than fine for black. Black's totally fine here. Black's position is even easier already. And after knight d6, check, bishop takes, bishop takes. The problem is that this bishop is not as stable as white would like in this position. So black can start to exploiting that immediately with knight b6. Then in case of something like bishop a3, after knight f4, black is even in the control already, because black's position is already very active here, and white can face some problems. So bishop c5, keeping an eye on this knight. But here queen c7, and white has problems to keep this bishop, because after bishop a3, now black castles to the queen side with a very dangerous initiative here, knight f4 coming. So one game you went bishop takes b6, knight takes b6, queen d4, still creating some problems, for black in development, apparently, by attacking the rook and threatening to enter on f6 with the queen. But here, Anand as black found a very effective solution for this position. King e7. The king stays in the center, but now black finishes the development and the f6 square is guarded. So the correct evaluation here is that white's position is already more difficult to play. It's harder to play already. For example, rook c1, rook a8, rook f1. And here the best continuation for black would be rook d8, queen g7, and black has the very precise move here, queen f4, trying to bring the queen to f6. And if queen takes h6, then bishop takes f3 and rook h8 keeps at least one pawn advantage for black with a clearly better position. The king is safe on e7, so no problem. So by this reason, d5 looks principled, but it's just harmless. Also, another move here that can be considered by white is a4. As we have seen in many positions in previous chapters, this move is also a typical way to look for concessions by black. But instead of a6 here, I recommend that black plays very principled as well, reacts in principled way with b4. This advance is also seen in other positions in previous chapters, and it's always a nice idea to disturb white's position. For example, in case of knight a2, knight takes e4, bishop takes c4, a5. Black is simply better here. It's black has a half pawn up, and white has no enough compensation. So white needs to play e5 here, reacting also actively. And the thing is that if b takes c3, e takes f6, c takes b2, rook b1. Now c3 is not possible, because after queen b3, white's initiative looks very annoying already. Attacking this bishop, and there's no easy way to develop black's play here. But black can keep reacting actively by means of g4. Keep exchanging blows here, intermediate moves, and attacks the second knight. So knight h4, as knight e1 is hardly better because the knight remains a little bit misplaced on e1. And after b takes c3, now this is good, e takes f6, c takes b2, rook b1. Instead of c3, as queen b3 would be good for white, now bishop a6 first. Rook takes b2, and here black has a very good idea, which is h5. Because the pawn is not blocked, then h4 is an unpleasant threat. For example, bishop h4, queen a5, knight c2, and rook d8. And black mobilizes the queen side with nice chances of counterplay by attacking d4. But okay, white can play knight h4. And now b takes c3, e takes f6, c takes b2, rook b1. But of course, instead of c3, queen b3, that is obviously better for white. Black can play bishop a6. And after bishop g4, knight takes f6, bishop e2. This has occurred in one game, once. And black had the strong continuation c5 here. Because this gives a free game and a nice development for black. For example, knight f3, c takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop g7, rook b2, and castles. And again, black is left with a good pawn up and a very active position as well. So yeah, both pawn moves here. Oops, both pawn moves here. A4 and D5. At first sight they look interesting, but further analysis revealed that they are totally harmless and don't pose serious problems for black. A recent game by Carlsen went knight d2, was played by Carlsen as white. At first sight, an exotic retreat and even a bit confusing, but white has the clear idea of playing e5 and knight d4, avoiding ideas like knight h5. So the safest path for black here seems to be queen b6, and after a4, a6, e5, knight d5, knight d4, we are in the main line of chapter 2. It's the same position. But okay, these are the possibilities when white plays bishop e2, bishop b7, castles quickly. But let's go back to queen c2. Then here bishop b7, g4, knight e5, queen takes d4. Looks a bit risky for black, in my opinion, because white is developing very quickly, and I don't see any reason to grab a second pawn when you have no need of that, and when black has more reliable options. So bishop b7, then bishop e2. Another move order here is rook d1, perhaps looking to a quick d5, but after knight b d7, I think d5 doesn't work, more or less like in the previous variation. But a4 was also tried. This is another different move order to try to exploit the idea of h4. But here, this move simply doesn't work well in view of g4, knight e5, and the black plays knight h5 here, which was seen in the last chapter as a typical counterplay idea for black, and here is a very good way to disturb white's plans. For example, if bishop h2, then rook d8, rook g8 keeps the annoying threat of g3 here. And after knight takes d7, knight takes g3 first, a very important intermediate move. fg3, queen d7, bishop e2, h5, and black was more than fine after e5, castles, long castles, and c5, and black was already in control here. I also analyzed in this chapter castles because I saw a couple of games by strong players with this move, but I think it doesn't make sense because black has many ideas advancing the queenside pawns, and also in many lines white would like to play b3 or a4, but now these moves only help black because the king is just poorly placed on the queen side. So let's keep things logical with bishop e2, then knight b d7. I also observed that knight h5 was played in a recent game by Giri, who is, well, of course, a great opening specialist in general, and also has some interesting games in the anti-Moscow. But I think this move needs further analysis to prove its viability. Even in this game, in this Giri game, black didn't manage to solve the opening problems in a satisfactory way. But the main point would be to keep this knight flexible, because black can develop it to d7 or to a6 in some positions, and this would be an improvement in many cases. But this move should be playable, but needs to be very well prepared, I guess, very well studied as well, deeply studied. But knight bd7 is the most played. And here again we have some options for white. I thought rook d1 is the most played, keeping the idea of d5. Then the rook is very well placed on the d5 to support the advance. But also different ideas can be tried here, like h4, which is playable, but I think at this point this move offers more options for black. Like g4 is a natural move, then knight e5 and the rook g8 is pretty similar to the previous chapter, the positions that can be reached. Even after knight takes d7, queen takes d7, bishop e5, queen e7, b3, we are in the main line of chapter 6. Or black can try knight h5, that is a new move, but I think it offers promising chances for black, especially after h takes g5, knight g3, f g3, queen c7, followed by castles to the queen side. Then black has nice prospects of playing for the initiative. Knight e5. This is a bit tricky, and it's important to be aware of the move order here, because after bishop g7, then rook d1 has a goal of transposing to the next move in the main line, in case of queen b6, for example. I mean, at first, the first goal of this move, let me explain better, knight e5 is to avoid knight h5, exchanging the dangerous bishop on g3. But also after bishop g7, the rook d1, there is an important point here, because black needs to play queen e7 in this position. And if h4, play something like knight takes e5, bishop takes g4. Again, with positions that resemble those seen in chapter 6. But the point will be clear in the main line. And also knight d2 is it's similar to one line shown in the previous comment, as it was played by Carlsen in a different move order. But here again, black avoids knight g5 and prepares e5 and knight d4. Then if queen b6, white can even keep some flexibility here and play rook d1, because now queen d4 is of course bad in view of knight takes c4. So black has to take some care here and play bishop e7. Not to g7 now, because you needed to keep d6 under control in case of e5 and knight d4. Then a4, a6, and castles. And here, I don't think black should play castles to the king side, because after king h1, white is ready to f4. Opening line is on the king side, then black can have problems facing this attack. But instead, black can play h5, and this is the point where you need to remember that different plans require different reactions by black, because we haven't seen similar ideas until now. But in this position, this counter attack on the king side is the best reaction for black against this plan. So after h3. h4, bishop g2, then g4, and black keeps trying to open lines on the king side. For example, h takes g4, h3, then bishop g3, h takes, king takes g8, rook g8, f3, and now the best continuation for black would be c5, increasing the tension and looking for open lines and looking for a direct counter attack against the king on the king side. So this leads to a very complex position, a double-edged game, but the analysis showed that black's chances are not worse here. Still, I think this is a less exploited but very highly interesting line that should be shouldn't be forgot by black, this knight d2 idea. But okay, besides these moves, white can play castles, of course, but as we will see, after knight h5, there's probably nothing better than rook a d1. Knight takes g3, h takes g3, and bishop g7. But here, the thing is that white got the position from the main line, but it's a move ahead for black. Black has simply won a tempo because of castles. So after the principled d5, e takes d5, e takes, c takes d5, knight takes d5, castles. Here, black is better prepared to face white's initiative. Because after queen e3, knight e3, for example, threatening knight f5, black has a very precise move here, queen e8. Avoiding this move, because if knight f5, then bishop e4, and black is already winning material. Let's compare this position with the position reached in the main line. Rook d1. Then here, this is a very important point for black, because white's plan is very clear of opening the sentry by means of d5 with this strong break frog. But the most natural reaction here, the most natural continuation seems to be queen b6, leaving the d-file and developing black's position with rook d8, for example. But I only mention that I think black's position can be unpleasant after knight e5, bishop g7, and here h4, creating this tension on the king side. The point is that if g4, then castles, and now black cannot play castles as well because of rook knight takes d7, knight takes, and bishop g4. So rook d8 first, preparing to castle. But here there is a very strong move for white, at least in practice, from a practical point of view, that is knight a4. Very creative but also very strong idea. The point is that b takes a4, knight takes c4 looks of course unpleasant for black, as the knight is invading on d6 and the queen has no good squares, apparently. And after queen a5, now the simplest continuation would be knight c5. Knight takes, d takes c5, blocking the bishop, castles, and bishop takes g4 when white still keeps some pressure. So this position can be very dangerous, can be very risky for black. And I think this is the main problem after queen b6. So I recommend now for black players knight h5. Just not only getting rid of this bishop, this is important, of course, but it avoids ideas like e5 or knight e5 before white plays knight e5 and places the bishop here, exerting pressure on the king side. So this is a good measure to reduce the strength of white's initiative, the power of white's initiative. Also because there were some ideas with d5 and knight takes b5 here, then the bishop would be very useful for white. So knight h5 is a key idea here to try to reduce the power of white's position, the potential of white's initiative. For example, if bishop e5, then knight takes, and knight f4 looks already much better for black. And after castles, knight takes g3, h takes, and bishop g7, we have transposed it to a position already seen. Instead, white continues with d5, which is the most principled, and we will exchange all the pawns in the center. C takes d5, e takes d5, e takes d5, and knight takes. Then knight takes g3, h takes g3, and bishop g7. Here, if white plays too soft castles, then castles is okay for black, as we have seen. If knight e3, then queen e8 is a precise research here to keep the control for black. Instead, white needs to play actively, and knight e3 is the most active move here. Clearing the d file, but also preparing knight f5. Then putting a lot of pressure on black's position. Now it's also important to play the best move to remember the correct moves for black, because castles is totally lost after knight f5, of course. There are too much pressure in black's position. Instead, queen a5 is a nice check because it disturbs white's coordination, as white needs to play king f1 here. But of course, black's deprived from castling now because of this knight hanging on d7. So rook d8, preparing to castles, knight f5, and here is not possible castling again. So king f8. And one game went knight takes g7. This was a game played by Shirov as black, but this kind of helped black to solve the problems, because now black took the chance of simplifying the position further with bishop takes f3, and in case of g takes f3, queen takes g7, queen f5 and knight f6, looks like black is doing well, at least equal chances for black here. There's no problems in development, at least. And after the game continuation, knight f5, bishop takes e2, queen e2. Black's position still looks a bit uncomfortable, actually considerably uncomfortable because of the pressure on both central files. But it's very instructive how Shirov used the tactics to made use of tactics to solve his opening problems from this point. So he played knight e5, a very good move, because after rook takes d8, queen takes queen e5, there is this check on d1, queen e1, queen d3, regaining the piece with a pawn up. And after g4, that was played in the game, supporting the knight, f6, and g3. Black still have some problems of coordination here, of course, but Shirov kept finding good moves to solve this problem. Queen c7, rook d8, queen d8, f4, g takes f4, g takes, knight d3, queen e4, and now rook h7, preparing to bring the rook to the game by the second rank. And after king g2, then black found a strong tactical idea here, queen d5, winning a second pawn. And in the end, Shirov won the game. So there is no reason to simplify for white, of course, because black still doesn't have all the pieces in the game, and the knight's very strong on f5. So rook d6 is of course a stronger idea, because the rook keeps the pressure on the d file. Also, white prepares to play queen d1, increasing that pressure, and the rook helps to attack the king side as well. Here, at this point, all the games found in the database played in this position ended very bad for black. For example, bishop takes f3, g takes f3, vacating g2 for the king, and knight e5. Because knight c5 loses on the spot to b4, a very strong resource. But knight e5 was not better, as white had a beautiful idea here as well. Queen c3, that wins a piece, because black has to avoid the mate on the back rank and retreat the queen. But then rook takes d8, queen takes, knight takes g7, winning the knight, and white is a piece ahead here. Another game went knight bh, but that was not enough as well. Queen d1, and if knight c6, now defending the rook, then rook d7 with a decisive invasion of the 7th rank. Black tried bishop f6, trying to exploit this pin on the d file in his favor, but then followed another very strong tactical idea. Knight takes g5, and the black is defenseless now. Queen b6, still trying to exploit the pin on the d file. Bishop takes g5, loses after queen d4, rook g8, queen c5, creating a dangerous discovered check, king e8, and rook h to h6, sacrificing the rook. That of course can't be accepted, but rook e6 is coming to decide the game, or similar ideas. So black tried queen b6, but after knight takes f7, white was totally winning again. Because after king takes f7, then bishop h5, king f8, and queen e2 would win quickly. Too many threats to deal for black. So both examples show that black has to find something good and something very immediate to deal with the attack. Otherwise, white will win in a couple of moves. We'll have a quick win. But with the help of the computer, I found throughout some analysis that queen takes a2 is possible here. Winning a second pawn and probably a third pawn as well, demolishing white's queen side. And in many cases, accepting that black is going to lose the d7, the knight on d7. But in return, black expects to have a nice compensation with the queenside pawns. For example, knight takes g7 is possible, king takes g7, queen d2. But here, black has also has some resources. Queen b1 check, and both retreats for white doesn't give an advantage, but the lines are not so easy. In case of knight e1, then the queen goes back to help the defense, defending the knight. g4, queen f4, winning a tempo attacking the queen, queen d1. And now the pressure looks winning on the d file, but there is another beautiful idea here for black. Rook h e8, and if rook takes d7, rook takes e2. And against either recapture on e2, black regains the rook, because if king e2, then queen g4. Another beautiful resource is here bishop f3, then bishop takes, knight takes, and suddenly black has queen takes d6, queen takes, knight f6, with a winning attack, or a winning idea that at least he regains the material. Okay. So this is one example, and the queen d1 is more logical, keeping the pressure on g7 and threatening queen the piece. Here, if black plays queen a4, following the same idea of attacking the queen, then this move loses on the spot after queen e1. The reason will be clear in a few moves, but bishop d1 is a very strong threat here with mate on e7. So the best move is queen b3. And the point is that if queen e1 now, then black can still take the pawn on b2. And if bishop takes c4, then bishop f6. Just defending the e7 square and also protecting the rook. The bishop is hanging on c4, so black wins a vital tempo here to organize the defense. This resource wouldn't be available with the queen on a4, because then white would play rook takes f6, but with the queen on b2, it works. So the analysis show that black's position is very delicate, of course, but with the correct moves, it's possible to face white's attack here. And after rook takes d7, then queen takes d1, rook takes d1, rook takes, bishop takes d1, bishop takes b2. The position has cleared after these exchanges, and white has emerged with a piece up. But On the other hand, black has 3 pawns on the queen side and an active bishop pair, which make things more balanced. So I offer some analysis. They are not entirely forced, but they can give some impression of what's going on this endgame. For example, if king e2, then bishop e4, and white is still unable to organize the pieces in the best way possible. For example, knight d4, a6, f3, bishop d3, king g2, and b4, and the pawns keep advancing. Then they can be very dangerous. And after bishop c2, preparing to bring the king, then a5, king e2, and here the knight f5 still cramps black's position a bit, so it's important to exchange this knight, bishop c8. Even after knight d6, bishop d7 here would be bad in view of rook b1. So black plays king g7, giving back one of the pawns, knight takes b5, but that would allow black to activate the rook. And there's no easy way for white to escape from these checks. And after knight takes g5, h takes, again, white wins a pawn, but then the endgame is still very complicated, and probably drawish, as white likely will have to give back the piece to stop the pawns from promoting. But of course, this is an improvement over theory. Queen takes a2, queen d1, queen b3. But the endgame is, of course, very, very complex here, and anything can happen. The analyses are not forced, but they give a hint of how things can develop for both sides. So I think the plan with queen c2 and rook d1 is, at least in a practical point of view, is a very interesting choice for white, because white's moves are incredibly easy here, and they can put black in risk unexpectedly. But you should remember that knight h5 is an important move to exchange the dark-squared bishop. And after exchanging everything in the center, then it's also important for black to remember the correct moves to avoid getting to avoid falling under a crushing attack by white. But the main point here is that after rook d6, then white should be ready to sacrifice this knight in return for the 3 passed pawns on the queen side, when the endgame is very double-edged and complicated for both sides.